Hi, I'm Tony Logosz from Slingshot Sports, and we're here to talk about surf wings, hydrofoiling in the waves, all kinds of different wing configurations and ideas and concepts. We'll start out with H2. This wing is if you look at it, it's a fairly flat profile, but it's still kind of a gull form, meaning it has a little dihedral, a little anhedral, and slightly cranked tips with a winglet. What this does is it gives it the wing a lot of stability because it's fairly flat. It has a super smooth roll characteristic, so it basically you have to kind of carve it around. Once it's carving, it'll continue to carve, and you have to apply force on the other side of the wing to bring it back, and it'll basically, it's real smooth and fairly dynamic as far as its speed. It has a slightly negative camber in the bottom shape, which is kind of a concave. Putting this shape into a hydrofoil is like having the flaps down on an airplane. So when you have your flaps down and you're in an airplane, you look out and you're taking off and you have the flaps down, it basically gives the wing, for its size, quite a bit of lift. It also governs its speed. So this wing is kind of built for a certain takeoff speed and to a top speed that's kind of built into a range. So once we figured out the range we wanted, we put the right amount of flap in it to have enough lift so it has early takeoff, about 6 knots of speed. You can pump it into the wave, and then its top speed is about 18 knots maximum. So on a small wave, that's pretty good range. That's great for the light wind stuff. It's still being flat, it's still very pumpable, and that is basically having those flaps down just allows it to have a ton of lift all the time. Of course, if you were wanting to go beyond 18 knots, you'd want to take the flaps out, and that would be a different model. So this thing has a huge range. You can ride a pretty small waves because it has a pretty early takeoff speed. You also have decent top end speed. I mean, in a hydrofoil, 18 knots is not very fast, but in surfing, it's pretty fast for the conditions you're riding in. It's adequate, or it actually matches the wave speed. Going down the line, that's pretty fast. It feels quite fast at 21 miles an hour. And so that's actually a great range for small waves to up to like shoulder high waves. That's a great range. So this wing has a broad range. It's also quite flat in its form, even it has a slightly cranked tip. The crank tip, when you turn it into, which turns it into like a slight gull, so it has, the shape is coming up and then coming down. The crank tip is bringing it down into more of a gull form, but this is really subtle because it's very flat. So the flatness of this wing gives it a lot of stability so this will give it more pumping power. If you have a wing that is more elliptical in curve or gulled, the crank tips, they change the carving, but they lose some pumpability. So for really good pumping for its span and its size, with the combination of having a high lifted bottom, profile basically to give it pretty high lift, it's a great combination. For that low speed range is where it's pumpable. So this wing likes to pump in more of it. Doesn't pump in a carving form as well as some other wings we have, but it pumps really well in a jackhammer form. I call it the jackhammer kind of pop technique, where you hammer it, and you let off and you hammer it. So if you hammer it, all that force of lift rebounds and it pops up, and it actually becomes a pretty efficient form of pumping for this wing. So you can lap waves with it. You can ride it behind a boat, second, third, fourth wave, and it's really kind of cruisy because it's very carvy. It's really stable, and I think for beginning, it's a really good place to start because it's not so low performance that you're not going to grow into it, but it's also high enough performance that it meets most of the requirements that you're going to want in a hydrofoil for a long time. even when you get new wings in your quiver, because wings are going to be, they're like boards. You know, this one's kind of like a mini tanker in your quiver. When you're learning, you might want to ride this a lot for the condition. Even 2 years down the road, you pull it out of your hydrofoil quiver, and it'll be one of choice just because of its range and what it does. Okay, let's talk about the span a little bit. So the span of this wing is about 27 inches. From wind foiling, I found that anything beyond 27 was really hard to turn. You could turn it and you could carve through your turns, but it dictated, the further the wider the wings got, the more it dictated your radius. And this actually applies quite a bit for surf. So if you get into the bigger wings, they start dictating how it's going to carve and how much, it takes a lot more to roll them over. It takes a lot more. They become less maneuverable. And I found the magic span was like 27, was still quite maneuverable, or and for surf it's 25 to 27 was the sweet spot. Beyond that, they have more lift, of course, and they're great for pumping and they're great for downwinders when you need more lift, but they also start to limit the turn and how you can roll them over with power. So you have to be way more aggressive on the big wings to get the same kind of roll and turn. So 27 is a great size just for a nice compromise for convenience, nice turning. It's kind of in the sweet spots. It still turns great, and it doesn't feel real big, but it has plenty of power. Okay, let me talk a little bit about the tips. So if you look at Slingshot's tips, we have a slight winglet on all of our surf wings. This is for safety. It also gives the wing a little bit of performance as far as trapping the vortice. You get a vortex coming off the wingtip, and it's going to trap that and try to control a little bit of the flow coming over the top. But the main reason is just safety. Having this little turn down tip will make it really nice, so so you can, it's not sharp. If you take one of our, race foils from kiting or even wind foiling, some that's more aggressive, more efficient, it's, you wouldn't do this to the end of it. You're riding, and sometimes you just get an awkward situation where you might break at the waist or whatever, and if you fall onto the wing, you always want to protect yourself and have, ideally have some kind of protection wetsuit. But if you fall, at least it's not going to impale you. Still might give you a blunt hit. It might hurt, but it's fairly safe. So this is a forged carbon wing, so it's 100% carbon. It's actually quite heavy because it doesn't have a foam core in it. And I've found, people really talk about weight with, you pick up a light wing and a heavy wing, and they're like, well, why would you build them heavy? But weight in surfing has it plays a big part of how the wing actually performs on the wave. And I look at it this way: if you have a heavy wing, it has a lot of inertia, kind of like if you were riding a mountain bike or a road bike would be a better example. So you're on your road bike and you're going downhill, and your friend weighs 250 pounds and you weigh 120 pounds. Who's going to go faster to the bottom of the hill? So the physics is all there as far as weight and momentum. Where you want light is pumpability. So when you want to accelerate, so you have all this glide. You don't have to pump this wing because it has a lot of glide because of this inertia, this weight. Once it's caught the wave and you've brought it up to speed, it doesn't decelerate very fast. So it has a great feel as far as glide and performance. Where the downside of weight is when you carve out and you want to pump. Now you're the 120 pound guy, you hit the flats, the heavy guy's way ahead of you because he ripped on you on the downhill, but now he's going uphill. Who's going to win the uphill battle? The light guy. So I kind of found that the solid carbon wings are still in the range where they're still pumpable. They could be lighter for better pumping, but they're still pumpable, so you can link a couple waves. But the glideability is more important, how they glide on the wave. Because if you make one that's really light, what happens is you pump great, you pump out, you catch a wave, and you pump in, and you pump out. There's no glide, so you're pumping the whole time. So basically you can lap, but you're going to pump. Even when you're on the wave, you're going to have to continue to pump to keep the momentum going, because it just doesn't have the mass and acceleration of just the flow down the wave surface. So being solid carbon, the downside is getting into the water, being a little heavier, but once you're on the water, the benefits are in glide and not having to pump on the wave. So if you're looking for a setup that is completely surfing on the wave without a lot of pumping, this is the way to go. And and it's still light enough where it pumps with that jackhammer technique. You can still lap waves with it, so it's kind of a good compromise. And of course, the durability of being solid carbon, I mean, the thing is bomber. And yeah, if you smash the reef with it and you nick it, it's just, you can fix it with a little body filler and paint or resin, but it's not going to really, you're not going to break it. It's going to take an amazing strike to do any damage to this wing. All right, so let's talk about this connection of in the wing connection versus switch fuse behind the wing connection. So the benefits on H2, you're probably going to run H2 90% of the time in through the wing. If you move the mast behind the wing, what it does, it changes the leverage point of the wing. So if you can move it all the way back in your back of your box, and you're riding a bigger board with longer length, and you need more leverage to pull the nose up, this would be a reason why you would move it back into the other position. Because now, imagine a crowbar, and you have this angle, like this back here, the wing prying that leverage up to your board. You have way more leverage prying it up here than here. But the benefits of that, of pulling this back, is now you have your mast a little further back in your track. You get a carvier sensation, more like you would on a surfboard, where your fin, you used to ride and your fins are behind your feet, or your rear fin is always behind your foot, and you get this carvy feel where it feels more like surfing in that position because of where the mast location is in the carve. It's like moving, if you had a fin in a surfboard and you put it too far forward, you mounted your box right under your foot, it would become really washy. Same thing, when you put it here, you get more yaw. So that gives you more, and some people, when they're learning, they might equate that to easier turning because it just does this really naturally. And then you move it back, it becomes more carvy and more tracky. So these are all personal preferences that you can play with as you get better hydrofoiling. But I would start with the H2 in the wing location for starters.